And I know, Pamela, this is also personal for you. You have a deep and important connection to Camp Mystic yourself as a former camper.
I do. It's surreal coming back here 30 years later. I was a 10-year-old little camper here, full of so much hope and joy. It's a magical place, and I remember the excitement and anticipation of coming to Camp Mystic. And the parent was telling me the same from her little girls who came this year. They just dropped them off on Sunday. And for me, coming back, I'm overwhelmed with emotion and I'm overwhelmed with memories. And I can't get over looking at those cabins right next to the Guadalupe River. That river was the source of so much joy and fun for us, Erica. We would spend hours and hours in that river. There was this thing called the Blob, which was like this inflated balloon type thing that we would jump on, and then the person at the end would jump off into the water, and it was so much fun. And we'd go looking for dinosaur fossils, and that was where we spent so much of our time at camp. That is what we loved. And to think that that same river is the source of this devastation, it's just hard to wrap my head around. And it's such a magical place that now all these girls, these sweet young campers who had to evacuate and their families, so much innocence has now been lost. And you just can't help but think about them and pray for them and just hope that more are found alive.
Yeah, it's so true. A woman I've been in touch with for a number of years messaged me yesterday who also went to camp in the Texas Hill Country, as did her daughters. And she said to me, you just can't understand how special this area is until you've been there, until you've been a camper there. And it is something that never leaves you. And clearly, I know, Pamela, you're feeling that as well.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the camp experience here is being in nature. You know, you come here and you're assigned one of two tribes. I was on the Tonk tribe, and you spend so much time building, good sportsmanship and a sense of belonging and companionship outside, outdoors, in nature. And to come back here after seeing sort of the wrath of Mother Nature and what it's done, you just can't wrap your head around it, Erica.
Yeah, it is. It is really tough. It is so good to have you, though, on the ground there and to bring that added perspective.
I spoke to the uncle of a little girl who was still missing, and he said he drove all the way here to try to find her. They are keeping hope alive, even as that hope is dwindling. And I spoke to a parent of 3 campers at Camp Mystic. Her girls survived, but what she told me was harrowing. And it also told me a story of just the heroism from the counselors and the owners of the camp. This parent told me that it was, in the middle of the night around 4 a.m. The water was ferocious. It was rising, and they were told to stay put, that the owner, Dick Eastland, and his son were coming to get them in the car. And while they were waiting, they saw the fury of the water continue to rise, and they knew that car wasn't going to get to them in time. And so they rounded up the girls, and the counselor got her key out and poked a key in the mesh of the back window in the back of the cabin to poke that out. The counselors went out. There were 2 in that cabin, and then the one next door that came over to help. And they were bringing the girls outside of that tiny window in the back. And the water was chest high, I'm told by this parent. The little girls told her, they said their counselors helped them across the rapids. So the counselors were handing the little campers, 9 years old, to one another to get to the hill behind the cabin. I mean, these are the stories we're hearing. And this parent said, had it not been for the counselors, who were so young, just out of high school, she wonders if her girls would still be alive. Here's more of what she told me in her description. 2 counselors were in the rapids and one on the dry hill, moving the kids from hand to hand. A lot of them lost their shoes and then climbed up the rocky hill to safety, all in the middle of the night. Then they got to sky high and cuddled because they were cold and wet, and sang songs and prayed. It just gives you chills, Erica.
It really does. It's incredible to think of, to your point, Pamela, how young those counselors are, right? Teenagers just out of high school, the quick thinking to then get these young girls to safety, help them scramble up, and many of them barefoot.
CNN's Pamela Brown is there. And Pamela, we just got this really just heartbreaking news statement from the camp.
Yeah, it's the first accounting from the camp of how many campers and counselors died. And in this statement, John, Camp Mystic says it is grieving the loss of 27 campers and counselors following the catastrophic flooding on the Guadalupe River. The statement goes on to say, our hearts are broken alongside our families. that are enduring this unimaginable tragedy. We are praying for them constantly, and it talks about the communication that's ongoing with local and state authorities. Now, we don't know how many of those 27 are campers versus counselors, but presumably a majority are those young campers, those 8 and 9-year-olds who were washed away overnight when the rapid floods came in and rose in 45 minutes, going 26 feet. And this community, I've been out here talking to them. There is so much heartbreak out here, John, but there's so many stories of heroism as well. 27 have lost their lives at Camp Mystic, and we should note we don't know if that includes some of the 10 missing and the one counselor outstanding. But I've been hearing stories of the night watchman jumping into action, going to one of the cabins and saving the girls, keeping them afloat on mattresses. Those young camp counselors, teenagers, jumping into action and rescuing the girls, getting them out a small window at the back of the cabin and trading them off one by one to get on the hill when the water is chest deep. Those counselors risking their own lives to save those young campers. And there are still so many questions, John, of whether any of this could have been prevented and whether any lives could have been saved. Those are such hard questions now, as parents were going to the local funeral home just a week after dropping off their kids at the camp to potentially identify their child. And we have reporting about the talks here in the county about potentially putting in a siren system over the years. 9 years ago, there was discussion about putting in a warning system for flooding. This is one of the most flood-prone areas in the country. The people here are no stranger to floods and to alerts. There's the question here of whether there was any alert fatigue, whether enough was done, whether evacuations should have come earlier, and we're going to be pressing for those answers to those questions. There's a press conference coming up later this morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, with Texas officials, and we hope to learn more about that and about those who are still missing and what those search and recovery efforts look like right now. John?
And Pam, am I right? You were once a camper at Camp Mystic, and now you're back there now. I mean, how recognizable is it after the devastation there?
You know, it's eerie being back here, John. 30 years later, I left this camp with a heart full of joy and the best memories of my life. This place left an indelible mark. And going back, you see the signs of the devastation from this flooding. You see all the debris of the girls, their loveys and their blankets in pink and their trunks. And that was me as a little girl. I had decorated my trunk. I was so excited to come to camp. I decorated my bunk bed. And just seeing those remnants, it's just heartbreaking for me. And, you know, those cabins were in front of the river. I mean, I spent so much time as a camper in that river, John. I mean, that's where we spent a bulk of our time playing and you know, going around and looking for dinosaur fossils in the shallow parts and playing games in that river. And that river is the source now of so much grief and sorrow in this community, John.
Yeah, so much joy there shattered, at least for the moment. Pamela Brown for us in Hunt, Texas. Thank you so much for being there. We'll check back in with you in a little bit.